To finish our look at arrays, what I want to do is show you an alternative way in which we can build an array. So you notice how we declared our array here and we assigned it to the variable, and then we populated our array with values here. So value 1, value 2, and so forth. There's a shorthand method to do this, and I'll show you this right now. And we'll just cut and paste something here because I'm a lazy guy when it comes to typing. So we're going to delete this, and we're going to use the lazy man's way of creating an array. So now we've created an array, and we've added items to the array. So you got a comma in between each item. If we want to store text, we have to use the double quotes, of course. And if we want to store a number, we can just go like that. So let's now see what our loop will pull out of the array. Here we go. Hairspray, fishing rod, books, and the number 2. So as you can see, I stored 3 pieces of text or string data. Remember, strings of text, strings, that's what nerds call text, they call them strings. And we've actually stored a number as well. So arrays are very flexible in that in JavaScript, in that we can store different types of information. To remind you, remember that like text information in the programming world is considered a different type of information than, say, a number. Anyway, we'll get into that maybe later on. But there you go. So you've learned the second alternative way of creating an array. It's sort of a shortcut way. This may be easier for a smaller list of items. If you're doing a lot of items, you want to go to the previous way of doing things because it's just a lot easier to organize. But if you have like 10 items or less, you may want to just create your arrays like this. So the question that you may be asking right now is, why would you want to create an array in the first place? Well, the obvious answer to that question is that arrays make it really easy to hold and organize several pieces of information. The second reason that may not be so obvious is that arrays have built-in functions. The array objects have built-in functions that make it easy for you to access information and manipulate the information inside of an array. So when we looked at the length property, now this is not a function, it's called a property. It's I never explained property, so I'll do it very quickly. In objects like arrays or the document object, you have functions that provide functionality, like we looked at the write function, but you also have something called a property. And a property is just a quality about the object. So for instance, if a human being was an object, let's say the cashier, going back to the old McDonald's example, the cashier, his or her function would be to, take orders. That's a function. They may have properties though. They could be male or female, or they could have red hair or black hair. They could be 5'6" or 5'2". You get the idea. Properties are fixed things, or not fixed, but they're things about the particular object, whereas functions are mechanisms in the objects that do something. So an array, one of its properties is the length. And the length basically tells you how many items are stored in the array. I hope that makes sense, or how many slots you find in the array. So let's say you have an egg carton. You may have an egg carton with 6 spaces for eggs, or you may have an egg carton with 12 spaces for eggs. The number of spaces for eggs in the egg carton would be the length of the spaces. I know that seems kind of weird, but that's what the JavaScript programmers decided to call it. So I used the built-in length property of the array object to allow me to get a count of how many spaces were in the array so that we could make our loop work, so we could print out everything. This kind of operations with arrays are often used when interacting with databases where you're pulling out a whole bunch of records from a database, and you need to store these records somewhere so that they're easily manipulated later on for, let's say, you want to generate an HTML table. And that's what they would do. They would have a whole bunch of records. They would stick them in an array, and then they use a for loop to generate a nice table with all that information dynamically. We're not going to get into that here, but I just want you to understand that arrays are a fundamental part of just about every programming language there is out there. They're exceptionally powerful. They're used all the time, and it's important that you understand the concepts of an array moving forward if you want to get into advanced JavaScript functionality, or even not so advanced stuff. Arrays are just that important.